Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk About Myths, baby. This episode, Liv is speaking with Dr. Alecto Hardwick, who is all about women and other marginalized groups in antiquity. So, aka, perfect for our show. This was a really fun conversation to listen to and to edit, and just to hear all these wonderful thoughts bouncing around, and also just to hear how Alecto approaches thinking about these topics. They have she has such a mindful way of touching on these things and thinking about them. And anyways, it was just really delightful to listen to, and I'm sure you guys will all have an absolute delightful time with her as well. You can find her at her website, which she mentions in the credits with the end bit, and also which is linked in the episode description. And if you have any project ideas, as you will hear her mention at the end, I'm sure she would be absolutely happy to have you there with her. Thanks so much, guys. See you later. Conversations. Get in the Dragon Wagon. We're going shopping. Women in Euripides with Dr. Alecto Hardwick.
But yeah, okay. I guess because we sort of changed this up at the last minute, I don't totally know where you want to go with Medea, but I would love to talk about anything that you want to talk about with Medea. So do you want to maybe tell me a bit about yourself and your research, like a little bit. Don't feel like you have to go crazy, but like, how do we get into Medea?
Sure. So
Also, no pressure.
I was drawn to women in tragedy long before I even knew that I was transgender, which is
a sign,
fascinating
maybe?
experience.
Yeah.
I was the only supposedly man at the gender conference long before I knew that was going on. But no, more generally, I am a Greek literature academic. I specialize especially in, I guess, where literature crosses over with psychology.
Ooh.
I'm interested in what ancient texts tell us about how people think, how people make decisions, whether it's audiences or writers or characters internally, how their brains work. I am, really interested in where Greek literature and psychology intertwine. And that kind of draws me onto identity.
Yeah.
As a trans female academic, thinking about marginalized identities and how they are constructed and imagined and how they themselves think is very much my jam. And Medea is constructed as marginal in so many ways. That's kind of why I keep returning to her and her story and her character.
Yeah. So then, okay, because Medea generally is an obsession of mine. It's funny that you wanted to chat about her, because I have another person who is coming back on the show, and she was like, can we talk about Medea and dragons? And I was like, well, hell yeah. So we're going to have like a little bit of a Medea spring, I think, which I think, honestly, in the year 2026, I think that's what we all
deserve,
need.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly. Just a little bit of righteous female rage. But specifically when you're looking at Medea, because you're looking at, her as a character through this like tragedy, are you talking this is the worst way of asking this question, but are you thinking specifically of like Euripides as Medea, or are you looking kind of to the whole of her, like, obviously because Euripides is beautiful, amazing, perfect, but also very limited in how it is able to cover Medea. But then there are so many other, bits and pieces. And obviously, like, on my show, we talk constantly about how those things, talk to each other, but then also how the different sourcing across centuries, changes somebody specifically like Medea, but everybody too. So yeah, that's like a very large question, but like, what are your thoughts, I guess?
So I guess I want to start with sort of pre-Euripides Medea.
Yeah.
In some ways it's hard to, because we don't have as much to go on. I think there's a Pindar poem which tells Medea which is one of the more extended treatments of Medea that we have from before Euripides. I think what's striking about her is in pre-5th century treatments, Medea is usually a goddess. Medea is usually some kind of divine figure. And I think constructing her as mortal and giving her all the vulnerability that comes with that is very much a Euripides innovation, or at least a thing he leans more heavily into than previous authors.
Yeah.
I guess the other place which we could return to later is Apollonius's Argonautica.
Yeah.
Because his Medea I think, draws quite heavily on Euripides, but is so sensitive and so vulnerable, and we get to see so much of her tormented thoughts. I think she becomes a really rich character for exploring fragility and indecision and pain, even after Euripides.
No, I think about her so often in regards to all of that. I've never been good at reading Pindar, and I can't tell you why. I really should. But in like
his Greek is quite hard.
That's the thing, and it's
also
always
that.
Yeah, and well, no, and also I will say I don't know Greek. I just know how to poke around.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I do know how to poke around with the best of them, but I don't actually know it. But with Pindar, I think I've just never, because I'm so driven to the mythology itself, Pindar has always felt clunky to me because it's always revolving around these athletic competitions and everything, right? And there's always a different purpose, which is fine, obviously, and has all of its validity, but then I'm forced to kind of navigate pulling out the athletics, and I just don't care about sports. But I just to keep going on this sort of, because Medea, I think, as an overall concept, is the most interesting part because of what you're saying, with Apollonius and how we get this sort of expanded version of Euripides. And then I'm thinking, and I'm gonna go wild here, we're gonna go into Rome, but that leads me right into Seneca's Medea, which is something I discovered only a few years ago, and then lost my mind over I thought Euripides' Medea was an incredibly intense character and play, and then you watch Seneca and you're like, oh, okay, right, you see the sort of I think it's the nature of how tragedy had changed in that time, but I don't know, this is not leading to a question. I'm just kind of oh my god.
There's a real darkness, isn't there, in Seneca's Medea and in Seneca's tragedies more generally.
Oh yeah,
I think writing under Nero, he's ultimately deeply concerned with the sheer power that ruling families wield in ways that Euripides, I think, doesn't delve into so much. But I'm comparing this especially with, if you've looked at Seneca's Thyestes.
Yeah, that's the only other one I've read.
Yeah, and there's that scene with the children being murdered in the grove, which I think is one of the darkest scenes I've read in literature. And I think, Seneca's trying to engage with, I think, power itself, and imperial power especially, but power more broadly, in ways that infiltrate the Medea story.
Yeah. And then just the innovations on the stage, right? Where you have a stagecraft where you would show a kind of brutal murder on a stage versus, in the Greek tragedy form where that's never going to happen. So it's an interesting thing to kind of watch how Medea specifically, and Thyestes, I should say, because that's a favorite of mine. I'm obsessed with that family. But, how a character like Medea can evolve with stagecraft and it felt like a very natural evolution for her to me, even though I'm no fan of Rome generally. But for Medea, it just felt so right to see her kind of in that much more visceral and violent position.
Although I think you're right. Although I think that with Greek tragedy, the way murders are mostly not shown on stage is a feature rather than a bug.
Oh, absolutely,
me,
absolutely.
it
I like
relies
the
on-
difference, looking at the differences
Yeah.
rather than there's no comparison of what's better or worse. But yeah,
And it forces the audience to imagine it.
yes.
And to me, the image the audience are going to form in their mind's eye of what the killing of the children looks like is always going to be more horrifying than what they can stage.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where Greek tragedy gets a lot of its horrifying power. It's by telling the audience, no, you're going to visualize what this looks like, and that's what's going to frighten you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree completely. That's why I like both, just for such different reasons, you know. But Euripides will always be like my beloved in a way that I cannot fully put into words. So
in that case, we can return to him for a little bit.
Oh my God, please. I mean, I'm like obsessed with Euripides generally, particularly because of characters like Medea, but specifically to me, like I don't know, I think there's something going on with him as a person, because the interest he had in the female psyche as compared to every single other man whose writings survived from the ancient world is my biggest obsession. Like, and I also am obsessed with the way that the ancient Greeks then decided that that was misogyny, because he like presented bad women. And when, to me, all I'm like is he saw women as humans equivalent to men.
Although I always wonder.
Yeah.
This isn't me disagreeing. This is me thinking.
Yeah, this is why I love the conversation aspect.
Yeah, when, for example, Aristophanes jokes about Euripides the misogynist.
Yeah.
In his Women at the Thesmophoria, where you have all the women plotting their vengeance against Euripides.
Yeah.
I always ask myself, did Aristophanes come up with this, or was this an ongoing joke already? Like, is the humor there that the audience would recognize jokes they're already making amongst themselves, or that we're introducing something totally new to them? And I always wonder just how much of that trope is something Aristophanes created rather than drawing on and perpetuating.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. And for me, what I think is interesting is the way that Aristophanes, like, insights, I say that in air quotes, because like whether or not he, you know, invented this rumor or not, it has taken on a life where I have had people come into my comments and say, like, how do you love Euripides? The ancients thought he was a misogynist. And I'm like, I mean, do you understand misogyny? Have you read Euripides? Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
The ancients thought a lot of things.
Exactly. The ancients thought women were barely people. And Euripides appears to have thought, hey, I think they're kind of interesting. And, you know, whether that says anything about his own kind of like gender or sexuality, I've always been so curious, or whether he's literally just like a guy who understood that women are people. You know, it's just an interesting thing to imagine, I guess, between both Euripides and Aristophanes, like these questions about, I don't know. I just like to imagine what they thought of women, I guess, because that's the only thing you can imagine.
But it's interesting because he goes to all this length to make Medea a person. Sort of as we've said, he takes a myth where she's kind of a quasi-goddess and makes her human, makes her a woman who's been abandoned. And then right at the end, she suddenly feels like a goddess again. She's suddenly abruptly pulled away from the stage, placed in the Mechanair, what various postgrads used to call the Dragon Wagon.
Why have I never heard that before? That's delightful.
It's very important.
Yes.
We suddenly get that humanity tucked away again.
Yeah.
So he does make Medea a human for a time.
Well, and I think the question of humanity versus the divine in the ancient world is also like such a big question, and one that I think that we today have a hard time kind of reckoning with, because there is such a heavy amount of people who are seemingly human, but also either have divine parents or actually have like divine attributes too, like Medea.
True.
Right? Like, it's such an interesting idea, because like, I mean, what did they really conceptualize as like a mortal? You know, Helen is such like a good kind of mirrored example of like, well, she's human, but she's not. You know, Zeus is her father, but she's human. And
humanity is not in fact a binary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. I've been working on a children's book of the Odyssey that's going to come out in a few months. And
wonderful.
Yes, I'm very excited about it. It's been crazy. It's literally just finished last week, which is why I'm all over the place. But one of the things I've been sort of struggling with is like how to explain to children like how we define a god and what type of god and all of these things, because like there is no hard fast rule on anything in Greek mythology, but we always want there to be, and especially when it comes to children's books, like you want there to be like finite answers.
Relatedly, a monster.
Yeah.
But which kind of leads me to think, how does Medea see her identity in Euripides' play? Because that's the thing. She's a woman, first of all. She's also crucially foreign. And one reason I love to explore Medea in general and Euripides' Medea is she really probes the ideas of otherness, of foreignness, that we know were extremely live issues in late 5th century Athens, with increasingly stringent laws about who could be a citizen being passed, and remain immensely troubling issues. Medea explored quite explicitly. So in her famous speech to the chorus, she talks about the difficulty of being a woman. And then right after her famous line about, I would rather stand 3 times in battle than give birth once, she immediately goes, but your story and mine aren't the same. You're from Corinth. You have families here. I don't. So she forces us to confront womanhood, yes, but also foreignness.
Yeah. Well, to me, sorry, go ahead.
No, please keep going.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to immediately modernize it, which is maybe not the best, but to me, it just screams of like, you know, admittedly, myself being among them, but like the white women versus every other woman, right? Like white women are at this like tier in the patriarchy that other women are not on, right? It's like, the Greek versus barbarian, women versus not, you know? And it's so powerful and so long, like, obviously still completely relevant today in
absolutely
the most horrifying way.
And the thing about tragedy is there's a vision we get of Athens in tragedy as a place that loves welcoming and kind of, this is in some ways a toxic word to use, but welcoming and rehabilitating foreign harmful influences. We get that with Oedipus in Oedipus at Colonus. We get it with the Furies in Eumenides. Athens sees itself as a place that can welcome in foreign influences, even harmful ones, and turn them into a source of strength. And part of the thing about Medea is, okay, she's in Corinth, but the play ends with her about to head on to Athens. She crafts herself as a foreign influence that can't be tamed, rehabilitated, turned into a nice little foundation stone of the city in the way Athens loves to do.
Well, it is that,
and
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No. Yours is mid-thought. Please do.
And I always ask myself, is Euripides saying something about Medea, or about Athens and how it sees itself and the people it welcomes, or both?
Yeah.
Go on.
No, well, and I just to like hit the nail on the head. God, what are phrases? I don't know why I try to use them. Yeah, because then the implication, of course, is that not only is she going to go to Athens, which is of course for Euripides like the Greekest of the Greek,
Yeah.
but also the audience is meant to understand what she's going to do in Athens, which then is supposed to go full circle to their own city founding mythos, right? Where she's going to try to poison Theseus when he rolls up. And so it's such an interesting, I mean, I think one of the most impactful things about Greek tragedy is when you know what the Greeks knew, because that is meant to be the point of it, right? Like, you're not supposed to watch the play and wonder what's going to happen after. You're supposed to watch the play and know exactly what's going to happen after. And I love that I do, because I have way too much of the stuff living in my head. But like, to me, that's, I mean, it obviously doesn't take anything away from the plays being performed today, but it adds so much when you do have the kind of understanding of the ancient audience of like what we are meant to know comes next.
And it's usually what comes next is the foundation of a positive cult.
Yeah.
So Medea flying off to be a toxic influence in Athens rather than a positive, beneficial one is in some ways a subversion of that. It's a subversion of the nice little cult ideology you get at the end of most tragedies.
Exactly. And it's in the same vein, an inversion of the Deus Ex Machina, the god in the machine, her flying off.
Absolutely.
In the dragon chariot, right, is already this subversion of like, that's not how plays are supposed to end. Like, that's not how the mechane is supposed to be used. And yet he did this. And is it Medea that he wrote in exile too? No.
I don't think so.
No, I think it's another one that I'm just mixing up in my head of like another powerful woman.
The other issue is that a lot of the early biographical traditions of Euripides are all kind of myths.
Yeah.
Like the story that he died being torn apart by wild dogs in Macedon is probably just...
You don't think that's likely?
It's probably reflects the Bacchae story.
Yeah.
And people love that so much that they sort of wrote him into the myth.
Well, yeah, because they were like, well, he went up north where that shit happened to Orpheus, and where we know that the Bacchae are gonna go wild in. Like,
so reading anything from biographical traditions of playwrights is just a mess, and a joyful mess, but a mess nevertheless.
Okay, hold on. I just have to be a crazy person and look up real quick which play I'm thinking of, because maybe it's fucking Bacchae. I think it's because Bacchae was produced posthumously, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Even
it's Bacchae.
Yeah. Even that, there has been debate over whether Euripides was actually in Macedon when he wrote it.
Oh, okay.
Even that's contested.
Yeah. I mean, it's also interesting. Sorry, I could go on forever, but
yes, I was going to say so Medea is othered in a number of ways, right?
Yes, barbarian.
She's foreign. She's a woman. So she emphasizes to the chorus. Again, we don't know how she thinks of herself. We know, there's always a chorus on stage. This isn't Shakespeare where we get Medea pouring her heart out in a soliloquy to the audience. She's ultimately self-producing to the chorus. She has something to gain here. She needs them in her corner. But I think what's in some ways scary about her is she's also terrifyingly Athenian. And there's this one part just after she reveals her plan to kill her children. She says that what she's trying to do here is helping friends and harming enemies. I forget the exact line reference, but it's just when she's first revealing to the chorus, I'm going to kill my children.
Yeah.
Helping friends and harming enemies, that's how you have the most heroic life. Now, helping friends and harming enemies is a heroic, epic virtue, but it's also an Athenian virtue. What she's saying is, this is the most Athenian way to act.
Well, yeah. Especially when you're doing it in Corinth. This is interesting. I've never thought about it this way.
She's looking at the audience and saying, by Athenian ethics here, which valorizes being kind to my friends and causing the maximum possible pain to my enemies, if we follow that to its logical conclusion, killing my children becomes right. And I think that's meant to confront the audience. It's saying, what is Athenianness? Are we, by our own rules, does this become perversely not just right, but morally demanded?
Yeah. Okay, I've never thought it in that way. I've always been so fascinated by the general speech when she is making this conclusion. She's going to kill her kids, because to me it's always felt like something where, from an objective morality, what she's going to do is terrible. But in her speech, to me, and it's been a couple years since I've read Medea, so I won't pretend that I can I've read it a number of times, enough. And, to me, it's always felt like, sure, what she is proposing is horrific, but she proposes it in such a way that you understand why she sees it as her only option.
Yes.
And so adding that layer of Athenianness on top of that, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and there's always this tension because, back when she's persuading Creon, when she's winning people over, is she a witch who can enchant people? Or is she an expert orator who can win people over? Because command over oratory is one of the most Athenian things that can be in the 5th century. So we're always, I think, treading the line between, yes, she's foreign, yes, she's a woman, yes, she's othered in every way, marginalized constantly, but provocatively, all she's doing is interpreting the rules which this new society have given her. And I think you're right that what she says, this is my only option. It's even more scary. She says, this is my only option by your rules.
Yeah. Yeah, like what an added impact to, now I would need to go back and read Medea.
It's the bit I'm referring to, by the way, is lines 809 to 810.
Amazing. I'm going to be picking this all up after. I've been meaning to get a Medea tattoo for a very long time, and you're pushing me closer to deciding on something, so I'm going to have to figure it out.
I refuse to apologize.
And you shouldn't. No, it's, I don't know. Medea's always been so fascinating to me, and I'm not sure how to weave this question into where we were going, but I'm so interested in it anyway. But like, it's always been really interesting to me, alongside all of this, Athenianness that she's portraying, and just the ways that you're like, I see why you see that this is what you have to do. And then I think on top of that, we were talking earlier about her as a goddess, and when is she human, when is she a goddess? And I think there's like an extra level on top of that makes it really interesting to just sort of theorize about. But like, what does it mean to have this woman, a goddess, who is also foreign? Like, and then what is, I mean, there's so many questions about foreign gods, obviously, right? And like, a lot of the time we understand them as foreign gods because of a story, like Dionysus, right? He's a foreign god, he's a local god, all of these things, and it's quite explicit.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody like Helios, the sun, her grandfather, where, he's the Greek god of the sun, he is their god of the sun, but by nature of being the sun and rising in the east, that's where his family lives, and therefore his family are not Greek but foreigners. And
Yeah.
what does that, what does that really imply to your culture and your understanding of, it's just interesting.
I hadn't thought of that, but you're absolutely right. He's a teasingly difficult to pin down choice as her origin.
Well, and she's like related to him, but also not. Like Aietes, obviously, like her father is going to be like, he is the one where she seemingly gets her foreignness from. But then it's like, okay, well, but his father is Helios, but Aietes is meant to be this like scary, violent barbarian. Well, then, so how is his father your god of the sun? Like, it's
There's also, you remember that part where in her big early speech to the chorus, Medea goes, our stories aren't the same. You guys have a family here. I am cityless, fatherless, familyless. And I think at that point, the audience is meant to ask, or could ask, why don't you have a family here, Medea? What happened to them?
Yeah.
Did you by any chance chop up your brother and leave him in the sea?
And why? Why?
Because again, so this is partly what I mean by her self-producing.
Yeah.
We are shown that she isn't telling the chorus the whole story because she uses the fact that she murdered some of her family as evidence of her isolation and vulnerability. And I think that's why it's ironic that suddenly, oh look, gift from her grandfather. It's not the chariot.
Yeah.
It's not just a gift from the gods. It's a reminder that actually Medea's family ties do give her a lot of power still.
Yeah.
It's an ironic thing for her to rely on.
Yeah.
After denying that she has any family to protect her for most of the play.
Well, and it's just generally the questions that one can ask based on Greek myth alone. Like, I could ask these questions forever. But it's just, it's generally, that whole family has been interesting to me for a while. One, because it took me so long to realize that the reason they were from the east is just because that's where the sun rises.
Yeah. And I realized that approximately 3 minutes ago when you first mentioned it.
Oh, great. So, because somebody else did that to me on a podcast a couple of years ago. And I was like, what?
Fully, I absolutely had not thought of Helios as a well-chosen god who rises in the east. So, yeah.
No, great. Well, somebody did that to me earlier, so we're together on this. And it's just so interesting. And it's like that added layer and like, but yeah, what does it mean to make, like, to understand your god as being from this place, but then also is foreign? And of course, that raises a bazillion other questions about how they would have understood other gods and the world itself. So, they're unanswerable, but it's just, I think it just says so much about what I personally find to be so interesting and just like mind-boggling about Greek mythology is like trying to just even conceptualize how people might have understood stuff like that, because to us now it feels so impossible to have like a god that is inherently like not one of you but also your god. Like, obviously just the way, from an objective standpoint, like Jesus is from Palestine and everybody says something different. So, from an objective truth that is still relevant today, and then also we have Mormonism, but from like an ancient world perspective, it's just so interesting to think about this, right? And like, okay, so they also fully conceptualize their gods as being I mean, and this is very true, obviously, but like being deeply problematic and like not really aligning necessarily with the laws that humans, you know, are kind of expected to align with. It's just generally, I don't want to get, I guess, into a whole conversation about
Sure.
Greek gods, but Medea as this example of like what is a goddess, what is a barbarian, what is a foreigner is just endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, and again, you're right that, you know, where she ends almost feeling like a goddess, before that, that passage where she's thinking about whether to go through with murdering her children or not is where she comes across almost the most human in the entire play.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, from about line 1020 onwards. That's, I think, the first time we really see her doubting. I almost think she kind of grieves in advance.
Yeah.
She's
yeah.
not allowed to lament after killing her children, but she does sort of weirdly lament before it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, she's like has to process her grief ahead of time in order to actually do it, I think. Like
it's a passage I give my students to comment on all the time, just because it's so rich and so arresting, and it's honestly pretty rare in tragedy that we get a character really being made to doubt what they're about to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like we get so much thought process in Medea too, in a way that is not really common elsewhere, where you just get so much internalization and this like kind of justification, but also like you're saying, like this grieving of what she's going to do before she even does it. Like there's just I mean, I guess this is where your interest with psychology is like as heavily comes in. And so I mean, I know nothing. I'm not a science gal, even that type. But
That's
like
allowed.
where yeah, thank you. I just like the myths, please, and I like other people to come on and tell me about everything else. But so like I mean, what I don't know how, I guess I'm just interested in how else you use psychology, or like what else kind of comes into play when you're, I don't know, maybe I'm putting you on the spot with this question, but I'm just generally interested in how psychology intertwines, but probably we've already been talking about that inadvertently. Thoughts?
That's a big question.
I know.
I mean, one axis we can use to explore it is just what the character says about their thoughts. We can take that at face value, and we can try and map it onto how similar thought processes work in and have been studied. Because there's a lot of scholarship arguing that Medea's thought process kind of matches when actual child murderers have been interviewed.
Really?
The justifications they come up with often echo Medea's. And what's interesting, I think, is that everything Medea comes up with is about community. It's about social rituals. It's about, you know, the marriages, care, baths. It's about everything, all the milestones she would have seen with her children. And it's also about how she's seen by people. It's about being mocked. It's about having people laugh at her for not being able to punish her enemies.
Right.
And the other thing is that, sorry, this is really
No.
Alecto rambles for 24 business hours.
Not at all.
People often talk with Medea in terms of reason versus emotion. Her heart tells her to spare the children. Her head tells her, no, she's gone this far, she has to kill them.
Yeah.
I firstly, I don't think that's true. She has actually got concrete arguments and heartfelt emotions on both sides. But also, reason isn't as significant a motivator as people think it is. Like, whatever you're doing, sure, you can logic something out or you can feel it. You're still imagining an outcome and then feeling a certain way about it. Emotions always plays a part. I don't think it's possible to choose a path to take purely through reason, because you are always evaluating how you feel about that outcome.
Yeah, reason is still tied to internal emotions in every way. Yeah.
And this works with Medea, and the rituals she compares, family life, social atmospheres, she's evaluating how she feels about all of them. And in that, can we find out anything about how women actually felt in classical Athens? I'm less sure about that. Medea is not most women.
Yeah.
But we are sort of constructing social rituals, social milestones, traditions, and how these feel and are meant to feel.
Yeah.
And to me, that's valuable for just historians of emotion in general.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many interesting things about this. And I don't know. Now I guess my ADHD brain is kind of circling back with everything you said to, how you were explaining the, when Medea's reasoning kind of fits with the Athenian reasoning, the hurting or helping your friends and harming your enemies. And what I hadn't really thought before was just about how, I mean, like, I think you're saying both. And my head originally was thinking like, oh yeah, her reasoning really fits the Athenian mentality. That's what she's doing. She's helping friends and harming enemies. But from a literal perspective too, like, because Euripides chooses to set this in Corinth, we have this like inherent, like, yeah, she's literally helping the Athenians by taking out the Corinthians and like causing all of this uproar, and then she's going to go to Athens. So it's just, I don't know, I guess that I sort of took us away from the emotionality of it, but it's just, that was sort of strumming around in my head, because it's just, I mean, I guess what I'm kind of getting back to is, I think maybe a time to remind the listeners of what that really means too, right? Because like the tragedies, Greek tragedies generally take place outside of Athens, typically in order to like tell a story that is going to make Athens look good and the other city kind of look bad in whatever way.
I'm gonna probe at that a bit.
Please.
I don't disagree, but I'm gonna probe it.
Yeah.
Carry on though. I'll let you finish the
Well,
thought.
I mean, it's just it's an interesting thing to relate. Like, this is making Corinth look bad, but written by Athenians, and of course, there's definitely complexity there. But it's just always been interesting to me the way, like, I don't know, I guess it's just an added level of question mark added to Medea's like entire persona, to be like, oh, but also by doing this terrible thing, she was inherently helping Athens. And so like, how does that add another layer onto how an ancient audience, who would be primarily men too, which is also like an added level of interest, like how they would see her, what that would even look like.
There's so much there.
I know.
There's so much there. I think, so people talk a lot about what it means when a tragedy is set in a certain city. And broadly, there seems to have been discomfort about showing bad things happening in Athens or to Athens.
Yeah.
Broadly, bad shit in tragedy is kept in other Greek cities a safe distance away. Thebes often.
Yeah. Because they're the big enemy of Athens.
Yeah. There's a famous Froma Zeitlin article called Thebes as Anti-Athens, which basically explores what it means when tragedy is set in Thebes. And I think it usually tells some kind of story. It's often about Athens looking good, but it's often also about the audience imagining this happening in Athens. When something is set in Thebes, it usually could happen here.
Yeah.
It's never usually, like, there are plays which strongly differentiate, Athens is a democratic city and actually plays that off against, say, Theban oligarchy.
Yeah.
Euripides' Suppliants fully has a debate on democracy, yay or nay. But it's rarely this couldn't happen here.
Yeah.
It usually feels like a story that could happen to Athens, just saves everyone the extra discomfort by not making it actually happen there.
Sounds like every Hollywood movie in America.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hollywood is the right reference to use for Greek tragedy. Like, if you think of, I don't know, let's pick a shit example, the Barbie movie. Most people who were even vaguely online either saw the Barbie movie or knew it was happening. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, most people were aware of it, even if they didn't actually go see it, would have heard people talking about it. That's how much coverage Greek tragedy had. Like, it's a full, everyone would have either gone to see it or know somebody who had or hear it talked about.
It's like equivalent of a blockbuster.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thinking about Euripides' Medea, the way people think about the excellent Kugler film Sinners, which I saw a few days ago and is brilliant.
I've been meaning to watch it. Thank you for as soon as it was
so good.
Broke all those Oscar nominations, I was like, well, I'm gonna watch it now. I mean, I was already going to, but
a deliciously good film.
The trailer looked so good. I've just been in such a dark place that I've been like, I can't watch it yet, but now I'm going to. In any case, sorry, keep going. It's like Sinners.
As you say, that level of cultural exposure is the terms we should be thinking of with Greek tragedy.
Yeah, and it's, because I mean, it's like it was their primary source of entertainment as a culture. And I think that gets back to the really interesting aspect that we kind of miss as modern people interacting with these plays, which is that the people would have known everything around, like, surrounding the plays, I mean, with Medea, I think this is probably the perfect time to mention and remind listeners that it is, according to the sources that we have, likely that Euripides invented or was the first one to use this element of Medea killing her children, whereas
absolutely,
and I think, and what is do you know offhand, there's the rumor about something about the Corinthians involved with this element. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
There's like something where it was like maybe originally he was going to have the Corinthians do it, and I don't know, maybe I'm completely inventing it. I'm sure I heard something one time ages ago, but it just generally it's an element where it's like I don't know, I guess it's like, I'm trying to think of an example of like some classic movie where if somebody made a remake and like completely changed like such a major element, right? I mean, it's doing that. It's taking, it's like, I mean, I think another really interesting example of this is Euripides' Helen, which is inherently also another one of his amazing works of women, but also this story where it's like people would be watching this thing thinking that they know what's going to happen. And that's the point of it.
Another one I love playing with is Euripides' Orestes.
Yeah.
Where he has Orestes actually voted guilty rather than acquitted for killing his mother, and then have to try and basically fight and blackmail his way out of that. We know Euripides likes playing around with established myths, and Medea actually killing her children was an innovation. When we have that line, whereabouts is it again? Yeah, line 790, where Medea goes, "I will kill my children," would have hit the first audience like an absolute hammer blow.
Yeah.
And then, presumably, other audiences, it wouldn't have the same effect on later audiences.
Yeah.
All these plays were reperformed across the Greek world. But then it takes on a different cachet. People going, "Oh, are you going to go down the theatre, see Euripides Medea? Apparently it's the one where she kills her children."
Yeah. Like, ooh, that's the Euripides version.
Yeah. It would become known as something transgressive, something new, something horrifying in a new way for later audiences. So yeah, thinking about different expectations which audiences might have when it gets reperformed and when it's more a cultural phenomenon rather than a new thing.
Yeah.
Becomes really important here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's just so, and I mean, again, I could theorize on all of this literally forever, particularly when it comes to Euripides, because I just think his work is so goddamn fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Utterly obsessed. I'm a complete, I will probably never say a bad word about him, but it's just, I don't even know where this is going now because I'm just interested in Euripides and his, I just love him. I love him. But it's, I think his Medea, because of the killing the children, because of the dragon chariot at the end, like there's just so many things about it that feel so subversive. And I guess I just want to know more, but I don't. I think people like to debate whether or not Euripides really was subversive. And I don't know. Thankfully, I don't live in the world of academia, and so I can just say, like, I firmly believe Euripides was subversive. But it's just, to me, it's so interesting to, I guess, just look at the characters like this. To me, specifically, when it comes to him, Medea is top of my list. But what I love about all of so many of Euripides' work is just that the women felt real to me. Like the women in Euripides, to me, particularly, like, as like an angry, childless feminist, like child free, I should say, very happily. But like, I just find the women in his work to be so much more real and like impactful than the other playwrights, by and large, I should say. Like, they have a handful of good women, but like, I don't know. I just think it's so interesting to think about that. And I guess I'm just interested in if you have thoughts on him as a person or theories in any way.
And if we assume a majority male audience, I'm putting an asterisk by that. We'll return to it. Then why?
Yeah.
Because I agree his women feel and have long been flagged as feeling real.
Yeah. And unlikable to men.
Go on.
Like, that's but real alongside with this unlikable to men. I think that's an important thing for going back to your asterisks, but all male audience, right? And like, but Euripides writes women that are like really unlikable.
And like, is he... So I guess the question I always ask is he genuinely trying to push against Athenian gender expectations, Athenian treatment of foreigners, or is he reaffirming them?
Yeah.
Is Medea's terrifying power meant to be liberating or threatening?
Yeah.
And I mean, my sneaky answer to this, and this is where I think I differ from your approach, is I avoid thinking about authors at all.
Yeah, interesting.
I think about audiences.
Yeah.
I
think he's the only one I think about.
Yeah.
So I think there's just something going on there, because I agree. Yeah.
That's fascinating, because that Euripides has managed to make himself into someone whose motivations we ask ourselves about is immensely powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, Aristophanes may have helped by making him such a recurring character, but Euripides, sure, I can train as a literature scholar and be told about the death of the author just till the cows come home, but I still find myself asking about what Euripides wanted or aimed for or thought. And I think in some ways that's what Euripides wanted to achieve. He makes himself a character that we have to engage with.
Yeah, and I think for me it's that, like, I mean, even aside from these like specific women where I think he wrote really interesting characters, like Medea and Helen, and Alcestis too is another like amazing one. But then there's also, to me, like, I mean, the Trojan women, like, is such, like, that is such an interesting, or just such a, like, I don't know, like that one too, like that's a huge question about what he meant. What was he doing? Was he pushing against Athenian tyranny and genocide, or was he affirming it? And like, or somewhere in between, right? It almost feels more like an acknowledgement than anything else. Like, even the women characters feel like an acknowledgement more than any kind of opinion, I guess. Like, I just more feel like he was like, this is how it is.
And it's not just Athenian tyranny, but also, I'm going to provocatively say, the tyranny of Homer.
Yeah.
These are victims of the Iliad.
Well, yeah, but I'm more connecting it also then to what the Athenians did, right? And how he wrote Trojan women immediately after.
Absolutely.
But yes, also Homer.
Yeah, like he's saying not just think about what, well, again, I don't know what he's saying or not saying, but an audience member viewing this could think, did we do this to the women of Milos?
Mm-hmm.
And also, these are the victims of a major literary text.
Yeah, like the
that's
biggest.
Foundational to us.
Exactly. So, the culture as a whole is at stake. Like sorry.
I agree. It's a provocative thing for Euripides to explore.
Yeah.
Again, like, you can see me fighting the urge to take Euripides' bait and think about his desires.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what I love about him. And like, because I don't come at it from this, like, I have to have perfect evidence for everything, like in the academic world, which I respect, but I don't want to be part of. But like, I'm like, okay, no, it's fine. I believe he was, what I want him to be, because that makes me feel better.
Honestly,
like,
I don't want perfect evidence for things either.
No,
in
exactly.
Some ways, thinking about audiences gives us so many different ways to respond and think about things.
Yeah.
Another text. Have you looked at Euripides' Ion much at all?
Stab me in the heart with the emotion. Yes, I have.
Yeah, because Creusa, that's one I return to with his.
I can't believe that slipped my mind in this whole conversation. The Ion, thank you.
It's one that I often invite my students, with content warnings, to compare with Medea, because with Ion, we get it all patched up into a neat little, just so story, and this is how we got all the Greek races at the end. But we are all so aware that it's built on sexual assault. It's a story and an ending and a foundation of all of Greece that's built on Apollo raping Creusa. And we're not just that, we are made to sit with her trauma for most of the play. We are made to see her suffer from it. We're made to see her also be so traumatized that she acts kind of badly, tries to poison Ion for a chunk of the play. It really... So, in Ion, Euripides really says, here's a nice foundation myth. Don't you love this foundation myth? Bad news. it's built on sexual violence against a woman, and you, the audience, have to sit with that for the entire play and then go home trying to make the ending feel right after that.
I'm so glad you brought up the Ion. I can't believe I hadn't thought of it. Oh my God. Because that one, I don't know how it's possible, but I went like 5 or 6 years of this podcast without realizing the plot of it. And so I just hadn't read it. And then I learned the plot and was like, what the fuck have I been doing? And so I covered it on the show, and I can't even fully put into words all of the, I feel like so much of my own feelings about the ancient Greek world were vindicated by that play. Like, I've had a lot of conversations over the years with authors, academics, and anyone really about the concept of, like, I mean, assault and consent in the ancient world and also in myth, right? I mean, my entire podcast, years before I started talking to anyone who had any kind of real knowledge, like, my podcast started out as me having like a however many years old classics degree that I wasn't using but obsessed with, and I just was bored and lonely and started reading Greek myths again and was like, man, they're just rape. They're just rape. And 90% of the forms where the non-academic everyday person is meant to acknowledge, like, take in Greek myths, most of those forms completely wash over the rape. You know, they use words like seduction or wrapped away or all of these things. And
it's completely translated over as well as whitewashed often.
Exactly. And that's like, I mean, a literal translation is like the best case scenario for that. And then there are these books. There is a myth book by Robin Waterfield, and I'm ready to fucking name and shame every time with this one because it's just called The Greek Myths, and it is one of the most common you'll find in bookstores. And in specifically the sections on Medusa and Pandora, it has some of the most egregious inserted misogyny that has no bearing in ancient texts or has like the tiniest, like, I'm specifically thinking of, and now I'm just going to go on a rant, I apologize in advance, but in Medusa, there is a point where this book, this like supposedly like these are the Greek myths, says that she was like obviously like raped by Poseidon. Actually, no, I don't even think he says rape. I think he like makes Poseidon seem like consent, but then on top of that is like, oh, she was punished because she said she was prettier than Athena. And meanwhile, it's like there's one line at the very end of Apollodorus about Medusa that's like, or some say that she said she was prettier than Athena. Like, it is not actually a canon note. It's not. You know, and that's how people take it in.
This kind of stuff is everywhere, and that's part of why the Emily Wilson's writings about how translation choices filter into, like, allow misogyny to filter into texts are immensely informative.
So important. And to get it back to the Ion, because I went on my little circular ramble, but the Ion for me
kind of
cemented
it sort of points to that in some ways.
Well, specifically, I'm thinking of like there's a conversation I had that I will literally never forget, and I won't name the person, but it was a very big author who is a scholar but also an author of Greek myth and of novels, I should say. And we had this conversation where I was trying to bring up like an idea of consent, like in a certain story. And what she basically said to me was that, like, well, it doesn't really matter either way because the ancient Greeks didn't really conceptualize consent. And I've never been able to stop thinking about that because it like hurts my soul in a way that I have trouble putting into words, because that mentality is so strong. Like, this idea that because they didn't have a word for consent that they didn't conceptualize it. And I think it betrays the level of misogyny that is just so deep in our culture to think that, because it's like, and to me the Ion was the thing where I went, no, like this is very clear evidence that regardless of the word consent in whatever language, like this is clear evidence that they recognized the trauma of these situations, and not just the trauma of a sexual assault as a concept, but specifically one by a god, which is the thing that so many scholars come up against all the time.
I agree. I also, for what it's worth, don't think we should privilege ancient Greek audiences over 21st century audiences. Like, to me, a pretty central aspect of my thought and my scholarship is trying to figure out how a 5th century BC Athenian audience responded to Ion, and trying to figure out how a 21st century Anglophone audience responds to Ion, are equally important endeavors. They are, you know, in the same way as also thinking about how audiences in other places in ancient Greece, or medieval audiences, or, you know, every kind of audience has valid and important and worthy of analysis responses to an ancient text. And for what it's worth, I agree. The idea that the fact that there's no word for consent doesn't mean the concept didn't exist and wasn't imagined.
Yeah, violence is still violence. Like,
but even if it does, even if it did mean that, the fact that modern day audiences read Ion as a play about sexual assault and its consequences doesn't have to have an asterisk next to it.
Yeah.
That's automatically a worthy reading because it's one people have.
Yeah. No, and I agree completely. I mean, I think for me, it's this. I think the thing with understanding, I guess, concretely, in whatever way anything can be concrete in this realm, but like understanding what an ancient audience felt, to me, is so, I mean, and I'm generally curious about, you know, how your work fits in with that as well, because again, it's been a long time since I've studied anything formally, but like, to me, I think what ends up getting kind of lost in some of it is the humanity of it all, right? Because when people say things like, oh, well, you know, that's not a rape in the myth because they didn't conceptualize consent, it is like, to me, that is negating the basic humanity of these people, right? Like, I don't care that they didn't have words to define it. They understood when someone's body was violated. Like, that's all it is. It's a human understanding. And so to me, it just, like, I get really mad when I hear stuff like that, because I think it is so devaluing to the ancient world. Like, and also, you know, most of the evidence that survives is from men. And so then you also have the question of like, well, we don't know how the women felt. So how dare you say that because there is no word for consent that the women did not understand this? Like,
I'm automatically wary of saying, well, of course anyone felt like this, just because I think that's always going to be more culturally specific than we think it is. That said, I think you're right. And
I mean, it's both, right? It's like, it's just, you have to acknowledge the humanity along with also saying nobody's a monolith. Yeah.
Things can be both human responses and culturally mediated and culturally different. And you're right that to say they didn't have a word for consent is ultimately to privilege who provides those words.
And who wrote down the things that led us to believe.
Quite. Who's writing those words.
What survived in order to tell us what words they did or did not have.
I think one other thing about Ion, and which also makes it a fascinating thing to read alongside Medea, is it's also playing with dynamics of are the foreignness and Athenianness. Because part of what makes... I'm afraid Creusa does a white feminism TM. And
she does.
part of the problem is she's hostile to Ion because she thinks of him as Xuthus' son, her husband's, not hers, but also as not properly Athenian.
Yeah.
And this whole trying to poison him with the Gorgon blood that her ancestors gave her,
which I have also things to say about.
It's very... It feels very much about protecting Athenianness, protecting her bloodline.
Yeah.
So Creusa is... I think... The good thing about podcasts is bits where I pause to think can be edited out.
Yeah. Though sometimes I keep them in because it makes you sound smart when you really contemplatively like think and then think a little bit.
But also I think normalizing academics' pause to think is important.
Oh yeah, I do minimal editing.
Yeah, I don't have all the answers at my fingertips, nor should I.
Yeah.
I think the play wants to wants the audience to scrutinize its gender dynamics and how Creusa's body is violated and how her trauma is perpetuated from that. I think in some ways it doesn't want us to think too hard about foreignness and Athenianness and how that's constructed. And Xuthus is always kind of the adorably foolish foreign husband.
Yeah. He's a little bumbling.
Yeah. In ways that I don't think the play actually wants to scrutinize much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Creusa is intensely marginalized in some ways and has the privilege of being Athenian and having a bloodline which people, like multiple people in the play are kind of A-okay with her trying to poison Ion.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to see her marginalized and traumatized and harmed in some ways, immensely privileged in others.
Yeah. Well, I think like Medea, Creusa is this beautiful example of like how a lot of Euripidean women are just people, right? Like
absolutely.
she's not a perfect victim because there is no perfect victim.
Quite.
She is a victim, she is traumatized and also turns that into something potentially harmful, and I think it's another one of these examples of like they're just people in the most complex of ways, and that's what I'm obsessed with. And I mean, Creus is such a good example, and the Gorgon of it all. Okay,
yes,
I think we have to talk a little bit because so Medusa is like my entire personhood obsession. Like I know too much about Medusa, and the Gorgon in Ion. So I wrote like a big thing about Medusa for a book a while back, and I went and researched like every reference to her before.
Okay, so firstly, please send me that. I would love to read it.
One of the things I came up against, because I was looking up like every reference to not just Medusa, but the Gorgons, and I went through a kind of timeline of surviving references for her and the Gorgons generally. And the thing with the Ion that I can't quite get over is I think I mean, oh God, I can't make this into a Medusa show, even though I want to. But like the Gorgon in the Ion is simultaneously not Medusa, but I also think it has really deep ties to Medusa. Because in the Ion, the Gorgon is not tied to the Gorgons of the Perseus myth. It's tied to the war with the giants and how that Gorgon was born from that war, and then that Gorgon's blood is either poisonous or curative. And to me that fits with a more, I guess, like generalized idea of Medea that I have developed from all of my readings, which is that like I mean, number one, the Gorgons are meant to be protective. They're epitropaic, obviously, but they also
Sure.
hold this power of like life and death.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I think it's so immensely fascinating that Euripides goes into these details about this Gorgon's blood because it doesn't come up elsewhere, like at all. And yet, like I don't even know, but it feels to me like a Gorgon is a protective, obviously a protective, device, but specifically I think that there are ties to women's protection in ways that we don't have surviving evidence for. Because and there's a whole memes that go around where people say like, oh, people put the Gorgon on their doors and it said something for women, and that's not true to evidence. But I think that there's something to be said for how the Gorgons were used, because they I don't know. This is not forming anything, I guess, but it's just
Maybe
I'll never get over. Please,
Maybe I can help.
please.
So there's thinking about the Gorgon head on Athena's shield motif.
Yeah.
Thinking also about the Furies and what happens to them at the end of Aeschylus' Eumenides. They sort of get incorporated as Athens' protective deities. There's a whole trope in tragedy and myth of Athens as a place that can claim monsters and use them to protect itself.
Yeah.
The
I guess
Furies,
like Erechtheus and stuff too are a good example of that.
Yeah,
We've got all these snake
absolutely.
people. Yeah.
And I think that what we get in Ion is, again, Gorgon blood transformed from something toxic and monstrous into something that can now be used to reinforce Athenianness.
Mm-hmm.
Much like the Furies are in Aeschylus. And the difference is that in Ion, the Gorgon's blood doesn't actually succeed in reinforcing Athenianness. It almost creates a tragic plot outcome, which then has to be grabbed and rescued and put back on track, and we can all breathe a sigh of relief. It's one of the delightfully hard to analyze Euripides problem plays. So, in Ion, shit has to be fixed at short notice.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of what Euripides is playing into. The idea of monsters being made into pro-Athenian protective forces, except in a way that could go badly wrong and needs to be rescued.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in this way that they also feel co-opted from somewhere else, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, because if I had never made that explicitly Athenian connection, because I'm too deep into the Gorgon as something that is so far beyond Athens, that it bears no resemblance. But so it's so interesting to think of Athens also like taking hold of that. But of course they would, because of the Gorgonion and Athena. And
and if you're thinking about bodily autonomy as well, like this is a step away from sexual consent, but the use of the Gorgon's physical body as a weapon. I mean, Medusa doesn't get to decide what her head is used for after her death.
Yeah.
The Gorgon's blood, it's in some ways a lot more, sure, I'm going to use the word violating. It's a lot more violating in some ways than the way the Furies are kind of homed in Athens.
Yeah.
Because this isn't monsters being turned into defensive, protective forces. This is them being turned into protective tools.
Well, but that's what the Gorgons are generally, and that's what has always fascinated me. Because, I mean, pre-Ovid, Medusa, there's no evidence that Medusa hurt a single person before Perseus took her head off of her body and used it as a weapon. And that's a thing I'll never get over, too. Like, she is not a violent being. She is able to be turned into violence, but only through her own death.
And it's interesting, therefore, that we've built this whole... I mean, have you ever seen any representation of Medea of Medusa in film or TV or art that
Already shaking
doesn't
my head
have
now.
a sculpture garden of victims around her.
No, exactly.
When
because the men make this and they have to be scared of her
Yeah.
because a beautiful woman who has the potential to damage them is terrifying. I have a whole argument that like the thing that scared men most about the Gorgons generally and most female monsters is purely that they were females that the men couldn't have sex with.
Mm. Yeah,
Like
I buy it.
It all goes kind of drills down to that like basic form of like these are women who didn't want them because the Gorgons lived in the middle of nowhere, the far edges of the earth. They didn't seek out anyone. Perseus had to bend over backwards to find them, kill the one, not because she was harming anyone, but because somebody wanted her head.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's just, I don't know. Again, I didn't mean to make this into a Gorgon episode, but it doesn't take much. And
So, how do we seamlessly grab this and return it to the world of Medea and adjacent Greek tragedy?
Oh, I mean, I wish. Well, we talk about how Aeschylus wrote a Phorcys play that we don't have anymore. The Daughters of Phorcys, but that's fine. No, that's not a real answer. I mean, I think that all of this, I mean, it all ultimately comes down to like the same big questions, which is just that, like, you know, what, I guess for me, the big question is just always like, what do we not know? Whose voices do we not have? Because I think that they would answer all of my questions personally, and I'm desperate for it. But that's not a very satisfying response.
Mm.
Can I say, was the Ion one of the alphabet plays? I believe so, right?
As in one of the ones that we think survived because it was in the large book. Yeah,
exactly.
Yes, it's in that section of the alphabet, I think.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to me again that this is one that the powers that be did not necessarily intend future readers to read.
Yeah, although thinking about how a work becomes canonical or doesn't is
big question.
A fascinating question in itself. And my answer is usually, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, right? It's, you know, this manuscript happens to not get eaten by worms.
Yeah.
But the usual answer is, so do you know why the 7 plays of Aeschylus, the 7 of Sophocles, the 7 of Euripides, apart from the alphabetical ones, do you know why it is they survived?
Because they were studied in school, right? And therefore were copied? Yeah.
Byzantine Empire school syllabuses.
Yeah.
And that's, stuff getting picked for a school reading list has an immense influence over what survives. And that's partly why debates over what should get set on in curricula, what's allowed in libraries today are really affecting to me, because you're not just choosing what children read, you're choosing what survives.
Yeah. People don't see that unless they're like in it. Yeah.
School reading lists don't reflect the canon, they forge it.
Yeah.
And what decision goes into that? I mean, is it that they think Medea demonstrates some important moral qualities? Is it that they think it shows good Attic Greek that baby Byzantine administrators need to learn? Impossible to say.
Yeah.
But
that's what's interesting to me too, just because you're like the Ion isn't one of those at the very least. And so what is it? And to me, the ones that aren't those are just generally interesting to me because it's like Helen, Ion, Iphigenia, one of the Iphigenias, I think the Taurians probably. And it's just so interesting to I don't know. I guess it's just I'm particularly obsessed with the fact that we have these examples of things that were not studied in school. And what does that say to us, I guess? I am trying to wrap this up. I promise. I just keep having more thoughts.
Oh, that's so allowed and indeed encouraged.
Right.
I don't know. Would I say not studied in school? Because again, they made it that far.
I guess.
They clearly kept being reperformed. I guess the alphabetical edition wasn't just
When is that one from?
Book falls off a shelf in Alexandria and then is found under a rock in 1900 AD.
Yeah.
Like, it still reflects plays that were popular and kept being performed. To me, so Byzantine Empire education choices were primarily, does this reflect good, clear Attic Greek style? And also, does this contain nice models of formal oratory, speech making, argument construction that our administrators can learn from? So that's Medea kept being taught and made it into sort of the canonical Euripides 7 reflects probably the fact that stylistically and linguistically it was considered useful Attic Greek source material. It's not, I don't know of it being any big aesthetic or thematic reason that Ion was excluded. But then again, I wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, even without, like, I don't know, I think I've also just, like, such a just raging misandrist at this point that I'm just like, I don't know, I just assume that, like, the men would not be interested in being taught a play that primarily revolves around a woman's sexual trauma. And, like, maybe that's me being too mean to the men, but they just keep showing themselves, so I don't.
Oh, very possibly.
Yeah.
I absolutely cannot rule that out.
Yeah, it's just interesting to speculate, you know? It doesn't seem like something I'd have a man recommend.
But again, and again, this isn't me disagreeing.
Yeah.
If that's a decision that was taken, that implies that they read Ion and saw that's what it was about.
Yeah.
For them to want to remove a theme from the syllabus, they have to notice it and recognize that it's important and troubling. We're still, by making this argument, we are suggesting that it was legible as exploring sexual assault and the trauma it causes.
Yeah. Which I just think it inherently is, but I guess there are maybe arguments to be made that, like, it's not. I don't know. It's so interesting. But also, like, I think what a great reminder and example about how, like, every single thing that we interpret as human beings from the beginning of time is biased.
Yeah.
Because, like, I can't conceptualize somebody reading the Ion and not seeing that. But that's because I can't conceptualize that. And it's, you know, I mean, that it's going back to the translation issues and stuff. Like, everything is biased. And there's this mentality, I think, that is only just now getting broken down, that, like, history is, like, a finite thing. When really it's like, no, like, a very specific subset of men up until, like, 100 years ago were defining what history is. And that doesn't make it less valid, but it is imperative that we recognize that, like, all history, all literature, all art, like, every single thing is interpreted and preserved and performed through a bias, whatever that may be.
And how and what and where we go from there.
Yeah.
How we recognize doing that.
Yeah.
What that recognition and what reading through that entails is, to me, some of what's most exciting about ancient world studies.
I agree completely, even though informally, because I've built my entire life around just having these conversations, and fuck if it isn't the most fun thing.
There is no correct or incorrect way of doing classics, much as the Academy might want you to think there is.
But this was so much fun, and fucking insightful, and I'm glad that we kind of turned it into just generally Euripides, but also so excited to talk about Medea again, because it's been a minute, and, like, she deserves me talking about her, like, at least once every few months. Happy
that Medea was the focus, but also happy we got to think of her through so many other lenses, including Euripides' other plays. Because she's anomalous in many ways, but I wouldn't want to divorce her from Creusa, from the Trojan women, from
Iphigenia is another
Yeah.
great among the Taurians. Like, that story is wild. Like,
so many delicious contexts, so painfully little time.
truly. But that does just lead us right into, I think you're going to have to come back and talk about the Lysistrata. If you
I would absolutely love to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been so much fun. Is there anything you want to tell my listeners about places to follow you or read more or anything of the sort?
So you can find out all the information you want to about me on my website. That's alectohardwick.com.
Beautiful. We'll link to it in the episode's description.
Wonderful. And other than that, yeah, you can find my book on there. You can find my articles on there. You can find my opinions on there. That's really all you need.
Beautiful.
And yeah, thank you so much, Liv. It's been an absolute joy. Would be so happy to come back sometime.
Beautiful. No, I agree entirely. So much fun. And I truly could talk about, anything from the ancient world, but clearly we have similar taste in what specifically we like to talk about, which is the ladies.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Also, one more thing I
Please.
add. Also to tell your listeners, I am always in the hunt for collaborators. I love working with creative artists in particular. I'm currently working with Rosemary Tickle, who's a composer, on choir settings of Sappho's Fragments, which
Be still my heart.
in ways that explore how fragments work rather than trying to paper the gaps between them. If you are any kind of artist, composer, musician, filmmaker, and you want to collaborate on something ancient world related, please do get in touch. Again, my website's a good way to do that. I am always looking for just new ways to approach and engage with and reshape ancient texts we got.
Hell yeah. Well, great. I love a call out. Please, people, because that sounds amazing.
Thank you.
And I'm going to mention some more things off mic about that. But for now, I'm going to say thank you again so much. This has been a true delight.
Thank you. Also, one more thing I wanted to mention is that I've been teaching Greek tragedy to undergrads for the last 5 or so years, and so many of the ideas I've been talking about in this podcast have been refined and bounced off my students and chatted about with them, and they absolutely would not, I don't think I've used anything uncredited from my students. I'm pretty sure I would have caught that, but these ideas absolutely would not be what they are without my students chatting about them with me, bouncing things back to me, and helping me refine them. So just massive shout out to them.
Oh, I love that. You're the first person, I think, who
Genuinely
has wanted to do that. I think so. And I love it. That makes me really happy. So thank you to your students as well. I mean, I understand that value. Like, that's why the conversation episodes are some of my favorite, because I can do all the research in the world, but like it bouncing stuff off people. It's like the Helios in the East thing, right? Like, I learned it because someone said it to me and it turned into a conversation. Then we're just going to keep sharing it around.
Every conversation you have, just you learn something different, or even just a new way of looking at this material, because like I said, every audience sees something different.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I love uncovering. Yeah,
it's the bias we were talking about, right? It's like everyone's brains have a different way of seeing these things, and it's so valuable. So no, I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
Thank you.
Let's Talk About Myths, Baby is written and produced by the one and only Liv Albert. Michaela Panguish, the Hermes to all your Olympians. The producer, tired, as usual. Select music by Luke Chaos. Thank you, Luke. The podcast is part of the Memory Collective Podcast Network, a collection of creators that all strive to bring you accurate and reliable information on the ancient world. These include the wonderful friends at Movies We Dig, The Partial Historian, Sweet Bitter, and so much more. Get ad-free episodes and others by subscription to the Oracle edition on Patreon at patreon.com/mythsbaby or via the link in the episode's description. If you're coming on there, there's some new and exciting things happening in Mayish. Are you a scholar or academic or an expert in something from antiquity, from Greece to Rome to Egypt to anywhere in the Near East? We would love to have you on the show as a conversation guest. Go to mythsbaby.com/contact and fill out our podcast guest form. We want to hear from you. We really, really do. We love these conversations so much. So reach out. Talk to you all later. Bye.